prowls for prey. I've heard good people draw their lines and call it holy rage, but the cross was never raised to bless the stones we throw. And if mercy leaves the house, there's something wrong down in the soul. Words ain't bullets, but they can hit the same. And once a heart turns cold enough, it forgets what grace is for. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No, no room for hate. No room for hate. You can wave a flag above it, you can quote a verse or two, you can dress it up like justice, till it almost sounds like truth. But outrage ain't righteous when it changes with the side. And you can't love your neighbor, treating them like they're downrange. We're all image bearers, breath of God and dust. And you don't heal a broken land by teaching it not to trust. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place. No room for hate. No room for hate. No room for hate. Drag it to the cross, lay it in the ground. Let the blood of Jesus turn the whole thing around. Truth can still be spoken, courage still can stand, but rage don't get to rule the soul of a faithful man. There's no room for hate in America tonight. No room in the home where the children need the light. No room in the heart where the Savior's supposed to stay. If Jesus owns the house, then hatred don't got no place.
Let revival start where the anger breaks.
Where the anger breaks.
Let healing rise up where the hurt gives way.
No room for hate.
No room for hate.
No, no room for hate.
No room for hate.
Not in Jesus' name. Oh, not in this house. Not in this heart. Not in His name. No room for hate.
Remember when entertainment was actually entertaining? When comedy was about being funny, movies were about telling great stories, and you didn't need a political lecture every time you hit play. Great entertainment still exists, it's just getting harder to find. Even the biggest streaming platforms leave audiences disappointed. That's why there's Studio TST, pure entertainment, real comedy, independent films, bold creators, movies, comedy, music, and more, and the home of fearless sketch comedy. That show tonight, entertainment the way you want it. Funny, creative, unapologetic, and agenda-free. Studio TST, the future of entertainment starts here. Join Studio TST today for just $5 a month.
Hello, friends. Do you have a moment so that we may discuss our Lord and Savior Minarchy? No, seriously, I'm just kidding. Hi, my name's Rick Robinson. I am the general manager of KLRNradio.com. We are probably the largest independent podcast network that you've never heard of. We have a little bit of everything, and by that, what I mean to tell you is we have news, pop culture, special events, conspiratainment, true crime, mental health shows, drama productions, and pretty much everything in between. So if you're looking for a new podcast home to grab a little bit of everything that you love all in one place, come check us out. You can find us on X under @KLRNradio. You can find us on our Rumble and our YouTube channels under the same names. You can also find us at KLRNradio.com and pretty much every podcast catcher known to man. So again, feel free to come check us out anytime you like at KLRNradio.
Hi, everyone. This is JJ, the co-founder of Good Pods. If you haven't heard of it yet, Good Pods is like Goodreads or Instagram, but for podcasts. It's new, it's social, it's different, and it's growing really fast. There are more than 2 million podcasts, and we know that it is impossible to figure out what to listen to. On Good Pods, you follow your friends and podcasters to see what they like. That is the #1 way to discover new shows and episodes. You can find Good Pods on the web or download the app. Happy listening.
The following program contains coarse language and adult themes. Listener discretion is advised.
From red dirt roads to the Capitol.
And welcome in. Yes, I know it is Chat Lives Matter Day, but to be honest, I've been off for a bit because I wound up catching some crud last week. So let's get this out of the way.
Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody?
It is Wednesday, my dudes.
So yeah, I'm pretty sure one of my grand gremlins gave me some crud. I went to the doctor the other day, found out I have a summertime case of bronchitis. I have actually been advised not to do things like this until Friday, but yeah, I don't do as I'm told. In the words of the Knox, sometimes the very young do not always do as they're told. And I still feel very young at heart, even though most of the time I feel like I'm dying. Anyway, so we're here, we're live, and Em, I keep talking to you about that. Quit trying to poop out the chat, man. That has to be hard on your colon. Anyway, so there's a running joke that started around here now because X broke something the other day, and it took me forever to figure out how to do a workaround. So if you're listening on X and you're used to being able to chat from the big window, guess what? You can't do that anymore. But at the top of the screen, if you're on it, well, on your mobile device, you can. But if you're on a laptop or a desktop, you're going to see chat is not live. So what you want to do is click those 3 dots at the top, click pop out, not poop out chat. And then you can type and harass me as usual. Anyway, so we're here, we're live, and I like I said, according to my doctor, I wasn't really supposed to try to come back until Friday. However, there's too much to talk about. First of all, of course, I had to come decked out today. Boomer Sooner, baby. Yeah. You know, our football program's kind of giving me pause. Baseball, kicking ass and taking names. Kind of enjoying our time in the SEC over in baseball territory. Football, not so much. And yeah, I have bronchitis, so I may occasionally sound like Peter Brady during the puberty show. But we're doing this damn thing anyway, and I have lots of things to sip on, so hopefully we'll be all right. And I also have, cough drops. So anyway, yes, we are here. We are live, and oh my God, is there a lot to talk about? I don't even really know where to start other than, okay, so for the longest time, and I have been saying this for longer than it's currently been happening because it finally is starting to happen, I have kept telling both parties to let people have what they vote for because it's the only way they're going to figure out if the stuff that they want to do actually works or not. The problem is now it seems like that has taken hold in a way that I didn't expect because honestly, by now I figured New York City be looking at Mamdani and going, what the hell is this crap, bro? But again, he has a media arm spinning everything for him. So he borrows money from mommy governor and then claims the budget has been balanced. Says that no, buses aren't free yet, but I told you guys I was going to work on making them fast first. And then, of course, goes out last night and picks up 3 new DSA seats in what the DSA is now calling the Commie Corridor of America, formerly known as the state of New York. I'm going to say this. I said this last night. The premise of the idea behind the Escape from New York, that was supposed to be fictional, guys. But I feel like we're trying to make it a reality, and I really don't know how I feel about it. But anyway, so we're here. It is officially Chat Lives Matter Day. And like I said, we have a lot of things to talk about. So I'm going to try to get through it all. We may actually even go long because, first of all, I was having some technical issues. So we started a couple minutes late, which is why I tried to run a little bit less stuff in the beginning. But we also have a lot of content to cover. If my voice doesn't hold out, we'll pick this up on Friday. So I'm not leaving anything off. Anyway, so again, today we're going to spend some real time on something that is a lot bigger than one primary night in New York City, because the headline is easy. The headline is Socialists had a big night in New York, and that's true, but it's not enough. The bigger story is that the Democratic establishment just got a live demonstration of what happens when you spend years feeding the activist wing, flattering the activist wing, excusing the activist wing, borrowing the energy of the activist wing, and then convincing yourself you still control the activist wing, while you spend the entirety of most of the last 10 years trashing one man, going after one man at all costs, and not so subtly wind up missing the fact that the socialists have taken over your party. Tuesday night, the activist wing looked back at the establishment and said, actually, all your bases belong to us. Mamdani, the commies candidates, the ones that he backed, went 3 for 3 in New York City Democratic congressional primaries last night. Brad Lander beat Dan Goldman. Claire Valdez won in New York's 7th. Daraliza Avila Chavalar beat Adriano Espala in New York's 13th. And yes, I'm butchering those names. And at one of the victory parties, when Hakeem Jeffries appeared on screen, the crowd did not exactly break into, for he's a jolly good fellow. No, they actually booed him. Then came the chant, "You're next." Now, I want you to sit with that for a second. Not Republicans, not Trump, not MAGA. Hakeem Jeffries, the man who wants to be Speaker of the House, the leader of House Democrats, the establishment head of the Democratic Party right now. You're next. That's not just a chant. That is an omen, and it's something that the Democratic Party, including none other than Hakeem Jeffries, should be paying attention to. CNN Van Jones may have had the cleanest line of the night, and we'll probably be playing the clip later. He said this was a battle between the establishment and the insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment, and he is right. But here is where I'm going to not only ask, but beg my own side not to get lazy, because I know what a lot of conservatives are saying this morning. They're saying, good luck now that the left has gone communist. I get it. I understand the joke. Hell, one of the Republican coalitions sent Hakeem Jeffries flowers this morning for condolences. Look, I get it. Trolling is all the rage now that social media is a thing. And I get it. Everybody's doing their victory laps going, oh, look, now that the Democrats have gone socialist, there's no way we're losing in 2020. What is it, 2026? Sorry. Did I mention I'm on meds? So again, I get it. I understand the joke. I understand the instinct. I understand the desire to sit back, open the popcorn, and watch the Democratic Party get eaten by the very monster it helped create. But while I understand it, I don't think this is funny. Not because socialism is popular with me, because it's not. Not because the DSA has suddenly discovered the secret to human flourishing, because, again, they have not. I do not think this is funny because a lot of young Americans do not hear the word socialism the way we old fogies hear it. Older Americans hear socialism and think Soviet Union, red lines, state control, secret police, Cuba, Mao, Venezuela, North Korea, and every other failed promise that ended with a government powerful enough to crush the people it claimed to save. But a lot of young voters hear socialism and think rent relief, health care, my student debt's going to be gone. We're going to finally tax the rich. We're going to finally punish Wall Street. Go after all the corporations, take that money back, make the system fair. It doesn't make socialism right. It makes the sales pitch very dangerous. And if the right thinks the answer is just to call everybody a communist and move on, we're going to miss the actual fight, because the DSA is not outside the building holding signs anymore. They found a side door and they kicked the bitch in. They organized, and now they're taking offices. So today, yes, we're going to talk about New York because we have to. Yes, we're going to talk about Mamdani the commie because, again, we have to. And yes, we're going to talk about the Democratic establishment getting the "your next" chant. But we're also going to talk about why this pitch is working, why young voters especially are the ones that are open to it, why capitalism's reputation has taken a hit, why some of that anger is actually real, and why some of it is entitlement, why government keeps breaking markets and then blaming capitalism for the bill. And later we are going to go through the warning from history, because nobody gets taught that anymore. Because socialism is always sold as compassion with a budget. But when the budget fails, compassion gets replaced by coercion. So buckle up, because Van Jones, Mother Jones, Van Jones, whatever the hell, was right about one thing. The roof of the Democratic Party is definitely collapsing. The question is whether the rest of the country is paying attention to that collapse. So let's start with the biggest piece. The news of the night. New York City had primary night, and that primary night is going to echo well beyond New York City, because let's not forget, most likely, unless Trump seizes control of DC again, there will be a socialist mayor in control of DC soon. So this is a ripple in a pond, not necessarily a one-off, because this was not just a few progressive candidates having a nice evening in safe blue districts. This was a political signal. Mayor Zoran Mamdani, I don't know why I still say his name wrong. And I know that sentence still sounds weird, depending on where you're listening from. The commie-backed 3 candidates in major Democratic congressional primaries, and all 3 won. Again, Brad Lander defeated Dan Goldman in New York's 10th district, did so handily and quite quickly. Now, Dan Goldman was not some random backbencher. He was one of the loudest anti-Trump Democrats in Congress. He was a cable news-friendly impeachment Democrat. He had establishment backing, he had name ID, and he had the resume. And he lost. Claire Valdez won in New York's 7th. Daraliza Avila Xavier beat Adriano Espilat in New York's 13th. Again, not nothing. Espilat was the incumbent. He had the establishment lane. He had the kind of seat the party normally expects to hold without much drama, and he lost. That is why this matters, because the DSA and the broader socialist progressive wing are not just trying to influence slogans anymore. They are trying to replace people. There's a difference between pressuring the party and becoming the party. And up until now, DSA has had a couple of different pressure points when they've been able to get 1 or 2 things that they really wanted on the agenda, but it hasn't happened fast enough for them. And because the Democratic Party has been so focused on Donald Trump and beating Donald Trump, they let the socialists take over. And Tuesday night, that is exactly what happened. Because Tuesday night looked a whole lot more like the second part, which is becoming the party. This is what I mean when I say the Democratic establishment has a problem, and it is a huge problem. For years, National Democrats thought they could use the energy of the far left without surrendering the institution to it. They thought they could let the activists do the marching, the chanting, the social media pressure, the campus organizing, the moral intimidation. And then when election time came, the grown-ups would still make the decisions. That is not what happened Tuesday night. Tuesday night, the movement showed it and learned how to count votes. And in politics, that is when everybody starts paying attention. It is one thing to make noise. It is another thing to beat the incumbents. It is one thing to trend online, and I know everybody today thinks online is life, but still. It is another thing to send people to Congress. It is one thing to scare the establishment into changing its language, or maybe going a little bit more along with your ideas. It is another thing to basically steal the establishment seat at the table, and they are slowly starting to do that. And this is what makes this different. Mamdani's not just a mayor now. He is becoming a machine. He's becoming a validator. He's becoming a turnout signal. He is becoming the guy who can say, this is our candidate, and in parts of New York City, that may now mean something very real. this is a major development. Because when a movement can turn anger into organization, it stops being a protest movement. It becomes a power center. And that is where a lot of conservatives need to be careful, because we love to mock the signs. We love to mock the chants. We love to mock the Che Guevara shirts, the graduate school slogans. Speaking of which, we really need to figure out what's going on in graduate school. I'm just saying. The free everything math, the moral preening, and believe me, there's plenty there to mock. But while we're laughing, and while we have been laughing, and while we've been watching the left demonize one man, they have been organizing. While we are saying nobody serious believes this stuff, they are now winning in primaries. While we're posting memes, they're knocking on doors. While we're making Venezuela jokes, they are building candidate pipelines. That does not mean we panic, but it does mean we should be getting serious, especially right about now. Because this is not just about New York. New York is the lab. New York is the preview. New York is where the theory gets stress tested before it gets exported. And if we work there, if it works there, they will try it somewhere else. Maybe not everywhere. It's probably not going to happen in Oklahoma. Probably not going to happen in Texas yet either. And probably not in Florida for now. But in deep blue cities, absolutely. In college towns, absolutely. In districts where the Democratic Party is, or the Democratic primary is the election, absolutely. And once they build enough of a bench, they do not need to win the whole country to move the country. They just need to move the Democratic Party, and that process has already started. That is how factional politics works. You capture the primary, you scare the incumbent, you define the language, you punish dissent, you make moderates afraid to cross you. And then one day the party wakes up and realizes the activists are not outside the door anymore. They're inside. Not only are they inside, they're in the room with you. That is what Tuesday night means. And again, I'm not saying every Democrat in America woke up today wearing a hammer and sickle lapel pin. Not necessarily not saying that either, but that is kind of a lazy statement to make. I am saying the socialist wing just proved it can beat establishment Democrats in real races. And that matters. Because the voters they are talking to are not imaginary. The frustration they are harvesting is also not imaginary. And the anger they are converting into votes is also quite real. The question is whether their answers are dangerous, and I believe they are. But if we're going to beat those answers, we first have to understand why people have started listening. Because this movement is not selling itself to young voters as, hello, would you like a command economy and eventual authoritarianism? No, they're selling it as justice. They're selling it as fairness. They're selling it as affordability. And you're seeing that today because there was and we'll get into this later too, there was a bipartisan push to make housing more affordable. What happens every time the government tries to make anything more affordable, kids? But now you're seeing everybody trot out that affordability word. Oh my God, I can't believe Donald Trump put that on hold to get his voter suppression bill passed. Well, first things first. Unlike most governors, presidents don't have a true pocket veto. A lot of governors can just leave something in their drawer and never come back to it. It just eventually goes away. It's not how it works. Not how it works. I kind of wish it did at this point, but it's not how it works. So it can sit on the president's desk for up to 10 days. If he doesn't send it back as a veto, it can sit there for 10 days. If Congress doesn't adjourn for an extended period and haven't set someone as a representative to remain in D.C. to receive the document, should he send it back within 10 days, then after 10 days, if they adjourn, it goes away. If they don't, it becomes law. So all this really is a delay tactic unless Trump full-on vetoes it, because I don't think there'll be enough to override the veto. But then again, this is a bipartisan bill, and they may get pissed off enough at him to override it. But again, that affordability word has cropped up a lot again today, and they're selling it as somebody finally punching the people young voters believe have been punching them. And that's the irony, right? Because a lot of young people hate big corporations. They think the corporations are the monsters. They're tired of seeing CEOs making billions and billions of dollars. They're tired of seeing people that they feel like, should be making more money, making less. But they don't realize how much work went into that person at the top getting to where they are. Now, we can agree or disagree about how much they pay themselves, because I personally don't think CEOs should be making millions and billions of dollars. I think there are other things they should be doing with that money. And yes, that includes Elon Musk, but it's not my money. So I don't get to say, hey, Elon. I mean, I can say, hey, Elon, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? But it's up to him. That's the joy of capitalism. That's the joy of freedom. That's the joy of an actual free market, is you get to decide. And we have started this whole thing of making all of this about the class of envy. And that's why we started losing the argument. But here's the thing, because the Democrats have spent all this time going after the corporations and making them the bad guys, and then also pushing for wages to go up, which actually only helps the corporations that they're telling people to demonize and make the bad guys, then it becomes this evil cycle of we're going to make things better, and then we're not, and we don't. And it leads people to realize that, they keep telling us government's going to fix it all, but then government doesn't. So maybe we should give more government control. So let's put a pin in that first big point for now, because this is not just a New York story. This is not just the Democratic Party food fight. Why am I suddenly thinking of animals? This is not just one socialist mayor flexing after a good night. This is a movement trying to become a machine. And when movements become machines, they stop asking permission. They start making lists. They start running candidates. They start choosing targets, which brings us to Hakeem Jeffries, because that may have been the most revealing moment of the night. There's a moment for Claire Valdez from Claire Valdez Victory Party that may end up being more important symbolically than some of the election results themselves. The crowd is gathered. They are celebrating. The socialists have had their big night. And then Hakeem Jeffries appears on screen. Let me see. I think we have that. Hang on. I know I had it somewhere. One moment, please. Sorry, I usually mute when I'm doing this kind of stuff, and I forgot I had a cough drop in my mouth. So you probably heard me chewing, and I apologize. All right, so let me get this on the screen. All right, it's not a very long clip, but in my opinion, it's important. So let me make sure it's turned up and you guys can hear it. All right, so you can hear the booing. What you can't really hear in the background is the few people that started chanting, "You're next." And that was kind of the biggest takeaway for the night, was not only are these people winning, they're now coming after their own party. The Democratic Party is currently eating their own, which would normally make me very happy. Except, as I pointed out yesterday, J.D. Vance is now starting to talk like Grandpa Munster from the Southern European Union, who says we should take ownership stakes in AI companies. J.D. Vance echoed that last night. So again, I asked the question, for those of us who actually want legitimate free markets, where the hell do we go? We're the last bastion of freedom on earth. Where the hell do we go? Maybe I need to sign up with Musk and go to Mars, but I would definitely have to get skinny first. May have to start considering that fact. I don't really know. But anyway, so there you heard it. There. So again, you saw Hakeem Jeffries appear on screen. Now again, remember, he's not a Republican. He's not even a conservative. He's not some right-wing talk radio villain. Hi, how you doing? He is the House Democratic leader. He is the man Democrats want to make Speaker of the House if they take the majority. He's supposed to be one of the people in charge. And the crowd booed. And then not only were they booing, they started chanting, "You're next." That's a big story. Because that chant tells you where the pressure is going. The DSA and the activist left are not satisfied with being the loud cousins at the Democratic family reunion. They're tired of sitting at the kids' table. They want big boy chairs. They want to take the House. They want leadership. They want to be able to control the agenda. They want to be able to appoint the judges. They want all the choice committee seats. They want to be able to make the rules. They want the party to stop treating them like a pressure group and start treating them like the future. And if Hakeem Jeffries thought he could simply manage this, Tuesday night was a reminder that the left may have other plans. And this is how revolutions inside political parties work. First, they ask for a seat at the table. Then they win a few primaries. Then they look at the person sitting at the head of the table and say, yeah, motherfucker, you're next. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying that the chant is the same thing as an official campaign announcement against Hakeem Jeffries, because I don't think they're quite ready for that fight yet. I'm not saying the DSA has already filed paperwork, picked a candidate, and launched a formal effort, because they probably haven't. But that's not the point. The point is the message that they are sending. And that is a very clear message. That message is no one is untouchable. Leadership is not safe. If you're not with the movement, you're in the way. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a very different kind of politics, because establishment Democrats have spent years trying to avoid direct conflict with their activist wing. They've always tried to keep these fights in the cloakroom, so to speak, and other things. Sorry for that image. But yeah, they're now fighting outside. They adopt some of the language. They adopt some of the questions. They give a wink here, a committee slot there, a policy concession somewhere else. They try to keep everybody in the tent, but the DSA does not want to be kept in the tent. The DSA wants to decide what the tent is for. And that's the difference. And this is where the Republican Party should be paying attention too, because the Democratic establishment's mistake was thinking that if you give radicals enough symbolic wins, they will eventually calm down. That is not how ideological movements work. If you give them a little, they treat it as proof that pressure works. How often have I been saying this? Working with these folks is a lot like raising children. If you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile over and over and over again, for as long as you are willing to give them that inch. And it's why I keep telling the Republicans, y'all really need to be listening to the people that are sending you to DC in the first place, because you're not, and they're getting pissed off. If you give them a little, they treat it as proof that the pressure works, and because to them it does. If you apologize, that to them becomes a confession, and we see this happen over and over and over again. There's a guy who's in trouble for going to the UFC fight who basically put out well, I didn't mean to, and they're basically eating him alive now. If you compromise, they treat it as weakness, because to them it is. If you move left, they move the goalpost. And eventually the people who thought they were managing the movement discovered the movement was using them as scaffolding. That is what we saw in New York last night. The establishment built the climate. The activists became the machine. Now the machine is coming for the establishment. And that is why Van Jones' line landed. This was not just a bad night. This was the roof collapsing. And I do also believe we have that as well. So there we go.
So this is the stronghold for the establishment.
Schumer and it never switched over.
Well, New York City matters because the two most exciting left-wing candidates are here, AOC and Mamdani, but also this is the stronghold for the establishment, Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. This is a battle between the establishment and this insurgency, and the roof is collapsing on the Democratic Party establishment tonight. If Mamdani gets a hat trick, 3 out of 3, this is a new era for the Democratic Party, and you can't write off New York City because this is the place where both, it's the power center for the establishment and the insurgency, and they're going head to head tonight. And right now, this is no longer a movement. This is a movement and a machine at the same time. There's just no way to sugarcoat this. If Mamdani pulls off a hat trick, is a new era in Democratic Party politics.
Well, and if you're a moderate Democrat who's on the ballot this November, Van, I mean, they're all going to get asked about the positions that we're hearing from these other fellow Democrats.
Well, look, I think, from our frontline Democrats will be able to make their case for themselves. I think they'll be able to do okay. We got a lot of national security Democrats in other parts of the country, but this is a big deal tonight. And I think that look, I don't know what you want me to say here. This is a straight up battle between the establishment and the insurgency, and the establishment is getting its butt kicked tonight in New York City.
And there's the biggest part of there's the biggest argument of the night. This was a fight in New York City between the establishment and the DSA, and the establishment lost. Now, again, I see a lot of folks on my side taking victory laps, clapping themselves on the back, saying there's no way we're going to lose now because the Democrats are turning socialist. And again, there's a huge problem with that. And no, to those of you that are watching us on YouTube, I'm not talking to myself. YouTube is not just a place we pull a large audience from yet. So anyway, I don't really care. But that being said, there you have one of the biggest takeaways from the night from somebody who up until now has always, at least to my side, seemed a bit like a communist who's now really scared that the communists seem to be getting control of everything. Just pointing that out. Just pointing that out. Now, here's the part that fellow conservatives really need to understand. This does not automatically mean Republicans win, because I keep seeing that. I know that's the temptation, and I know that's the laugh line, and again, I've seen it all over the place. I've seen Republican movements trolling Hakeem Jeffries by sending flowers. I've seen, again, people screaming that, oh, there's no way we're going to lose now. And great, Democrats went socialist, game over has kind of been the talking point over social media today. But that's not it. It's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. It might help Republicans in some places. It might make certain districts more competitive. It might alienate older Democrats. Jewish Democrats, however, I think if that was going to happen, that would have happened last night, since New York City is one of the biggest Jewish strongholds in the country. Moderate Democrats, if such a thing even exists anymore, working class Democrats, immigrant Democrats, the legal ones, and voters who do not want their politics run through a graduate seminar in revolution. All of that is true, but it can also energize younger voters. It can also shift the party's center of gravity. It can also force the National Democrats to adopt more radical rhetoric just to survive primaries. It can also move the Overton window. And if the right's entire response is mockery, we're giving them the field. This is where I think a lot of our side needs to get more serious, because the DSA is not just selling an ideology. They're selling an answer to pain. Maybe the wrong answer, but it's still an answer. And I do, in fact, believe it is the wrong answer. And I believe it's a dangerous answer. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I believe it is a dangerous answer. But they're talking to voters who feel like the current system has failed them. And if we all say, shut up, communist, we're not persuading anybody who's actually persuadable. We're just entertaining people who already agree with us. That's fine for a meme. It's not enough for a country. So the real question is not, can we dunk on socialism? Because of course we can. I do it all day, every day, in print, in audio, in video. The real question is, can we explain why socialism is attractive, while even though it is attractive, it fails, and what the better answer is? That's the fight. Because a lot of younger voters do not think they are voting for gulags. They think they're voting for rent relief. They don't think they're voting for secret police, even though that will eventually become a thing. They think they're voting for health care. Look at what happened with Canada with their health care they now have made. They do not think they are voting for state control. However, state control will always eventually become a thing. They think they're voting against corporations, banks, evil landlords, slumlords, insurance companies, tuition bills, and politicians who tell them the economy is great while they can't afford groceries. And that's why this is dangerous, because socialism is at its most powerful when it gets to a point where real pain offers fake medicine. And that's what we have to understand. This is what we have to answer. And this is why today is not just a news day. It is a warning. So we're going to take the first break, and I know we're long, but like I said, this show has a lot of material. So assuming my voice holds out, we may actually run long. So when we come back, we're going to put numbers behind this, because this is not just vibes. This is not just a few loud activists in New York and New York City area. This is polling among young Americans is flashing red. And I do mean communist red. Socialism is no longer radioactive to a lot of younger voters. And maybe the bigger story is that capitalism, or at least what they have been told is capitalism, has lost credibility with them. So we're going to talk about that, not to excuse socialism, not to excuse entitlement, not to pretend young voters are always right, but to understand the battlefield, because if you do not understand why the pitch is working, you can't beat the pitch. This is the Rick Robinson Show. We'll be right back after this. As usual, music break, and then we'll be back.
They tried to quench the fire, drown it all in chains, tried to break our will and wash away our names. But every spark they buried only fed the flame. Now the cry of freedom's roaring through the rain. Hear the cry of freedom on the winds of change. Every voice united, breaking every chain. We were born to stand and never bow again. Let the fire of liberty forever reign. Forever reign. Now the walls are shaking from the battle cry. Truth is rising to the sky. Every soul that ever felt the weight of chains feels the fire of freedom in their veins. No more chains, no more lies. Hear the thunder as we rise. Freedom's call won't be denied. Now the fire burns worldwide. Hear the cry of freedom on the winds of change. Every voice united, breaking every chain. We were born to stand and never bow again. Let the fire of liberty forever reign. Let the fire of liberty forever reign.
And again, welcome into the Rick Has Bronchitis, but it's Chat Lives Matter Day on KLR Radio, so I had to come to work anyway. Again, even though my doctor's probably going to yell at me if she hears the show. Anyway, so we're here. We're live. It's Wednesday. It's day after primary day. And the DSA just stomped a mud hole in Hakeem Jeffries. And I know that's supposedly racist or whatever. I don't even care anymore. Anyway, which, normally would be me going, yay, hey, look at this. But the problem is, not only, and we're going to get into this, not only is socialism very popular among the youngins, we also have the problem of J.D. Vance started mirroring a lot of the talk of Grandpa Munster from the Southern European Union, who was screaming that we need to take an ownership stake in AI companies. J.D. Vance last night put out a post that apparently Donald Trump is kind of okay with that idea. So again, I asked the question, now that the Democratic Party is fully embracing socialism, which is the gateway drug to communism, whether anybody wants to admit it to you or not, and now we have J.D. Vance embracing socialism light, and apparently the president potentially being okay with that idea, where do those of us who actually like freedom go from here? This is why last night can't be a victory lap. I can't let it be, because as fun as that would be, as much fun as it would be to play all these clips and make fun of all these people that are now, everybody's going to get all these free things. Yeah, it sounds great. It really does. But it ain't going to work. So anyway, welcome back again. This is the Rick Robinson Show. And before the break, we talked about the New York earthquake, the political one, not an actual one. Mamdani-backed 3 candidates and went 3 for 3. Again, Brad Lander, Dan Goldman, and Claire Valdez all won their stuff. And again, at the victory party, one of them, the crowd started chanting, "You're next." That's the sound of a movement, realizing it does not have to ask permission anymore. But now we have to ask the question that matters more than the chant: why is this actually working? Because if all we do is sit around saying, well, Democrats have gone communist, good luck with that, we're missing the bigger danger. Michael, if you can go back to your desktop where it says not live in the chat window, there are 3 buttons at the top. Click the one that says pop out chat. The only version of the chat that works anymore is the mobile version, and that one actually works along the same lines. So sorry. Let me put this on screen, I guess, so people don't realize that I'm not just talking to myself. So yeah, it does work. They just broke something and they haven't figured out how to fix it yet. But you can make it work. Anyway, all right. So sorry. I used to troubleshoot things for a living. Sometimes I can't help it. Anyway, but again, if all we do is sit around saying, well, the Democrats have gone full commie, don't ever go full commie, well, we're missing the bigger danger. The bigger danger is that socialism is no longer radioactive to a lot of younger voters, not because they all read Marx. Most of them probably couldn't have. I'm sorry. I'm going to shut up now. Not because they are sitting around studying Lenin. Just saying. Not because they're all secretly dreaming about breadlines and secret police, because that's not how socialism is being packaged to them, even though that's usually where it ends up. That's not the point. The point is that the word does not scare them the way it scares older generations, including myself. And that is a problem, and that's becoming a biggest problem, because the latest numbers we pulled are not comfortable, according to Cato/YouGov, and I know, cringe, YouGov, had 62% of Americans ages 18 to 29 with a favorable view of socialism. Let me say that again. 62% favorable towards socialism. And that same survey had 34% of Americans ages 18 to 29 with a favorable view of not only socialism, but communism. Now, there's an important caveat here. The survey did not define socialism or communism for respondents, and that matters, because one person hears socialism and thinks Nordic welfare state. Another person hears socialism and thinks government owning or controlling production, which is the actual definition of socialism. Another person hears socialism and thinks make billionaires pay for my student loans until you run out of their money or they move. And another person hears it and has no idea what it means at all, except the people on TikTok say capitalism is why rent is high. So yes, definitions matter. The ability to understand those definitions matters even more. But even with that caveat, those numbers should make everybody on the right, you should be all sitting up straight and paying attention right now. Because if socialism is favorable to nearly 2/3 of young adults in a poll, you cannot just treat it like a fringe campus disease. And here's the problem. A lot of those voters, the 2/3 nearly that favor capitalism or communism over capitalism, a lot of them probably haven't voted before because they haven't felt like it's mattered. If you give them a candidate that aligns with their idea that socialism is awesome, guess what's going to happen? They're going to be running to the polls singing the Lego movie song. Everything is awesome, because they're going to finally get to vote for a communist or a socialist. And they're going to think they're fixing America because they legitimately think America is broken. That's the problem. This has moved from fringe to mainstream to now basically being in the bloodstream of our younger people, because that is all they have been taught in schools. Capitalism sucks. America is the bane of the world. Socialism and communism are the way to go. And the problem is that trend did not start yesterday. We're going to do it like I said, there's going to be a lot of history today, assuming my voice holds out. And I'm really going to try to make sure that it does. So Gallup had young adults around 51% favorable towards socialism back in 2015. So in 16 years, it's gone from 51% to 62, if I remember right. So now in 2018, young adults were still around 51% favorable towards socialism, but here's the bigger problem. Positive views of capitalism among that same age group had fallen from 68% in 2010 to 45% in 2018. That is the real warning light here. Socialism did not have to become overwhelmingly popular overnight. Capitalism's reputation collapsed, and in politics, perception matters. Hell, in most of the world, perception is reality. Just look at what happens with the furry kids and the trans kids and all those kids. Anyway, so if young voters do not believe capitalism means opportunity anymore, it leads to ownership, upward mobility, small business independence, family formation, and the ability to build a life, then the word capitalism stops being inspiring. And this becomes another problem. Capitalism was always the way to go because everybody knew that if you wanted to build something, eventually you had to create a family because you wanted whatever you built to last and for people to be able to carry on your name after you were gone, whatever the case may be, whether it was to, keep your legacy going, whatever you built while you were alive, or just so people would know that you existed, etc. So another reason, and this isn't in my notes because it just occurred to me, that socialism is becoming so popular is because a lot of these younger kids don't even want to have families anymore. They have been convinced by the proletariat, by the media wing, by the educational wings, that the country's terrible, the country's horrible, the state of the world sucks. We're all going to die from global warming, or now what they call climate change. So why even bring a kid into this mess? So because capitalism stops being inspiring, because one, you're not really worried about trying to be able to, find your own place, own your own. You're not even worried about property ownership for most of these kids anymore. They're just worried about their rent being cheaper. And let's not forget that Gen Z basically reinvented roommates and thought they had discovered something, which tells me that things may have been better than we wanted to admit for millennials. Because if nobody was telling their kids from the millennial age to the Gen Z age that, hey, we didn't all get to start out with our own apartments either. We had to start with roommates, or we did this, or we did that, or we started actually paying our parents rent. I did that for a while I was in college. Because the college was right down the street. My mom was like, hey, as long as you're still in college, you can stay here and I'll give you a reduced rate on your rent. You drop out of college, you got to go. Guess what? I left college because I decided it wasn't for me, and she was good to her, or she was good on her word. And I had to go find roommates and find somewhere to live. But the problem with all of this is young people have started seeing everything as being out of reach and unaffordable. But the problem with that is they also seem to think that by the age of 18, they should be able to go out on their own, have a job that pays them $200,000 a year, have the house they want, all the streaming services they want, that brand new Bugatti, and all these other crazy little trimmings that come with it. Because somewhere along the way, the starter life became gross. We may get into that a little bit later too. But again, if capitalism isn't working for anybody anymore, capitalism stops being inspiring. Especially if you can get them to start being envious of the people that have made it, instead of saying, well, if they've done it, I can do it too. Well, they did it and now I can't, so they don't deserve it either. It starts sounding like a defense of people already winning, and that is where the left walks in. The left says, see, the system is rigged. And here's where the right has to be careful, because sometimes the young voter's wrong about the cure, but not wrong about the symptom. If a 25-year-old says rent is insane, they're not hallucinating, because let's face it, today rent is pretty much insane. If they're saying groceries are expensive, again, that's not them making anything up. Groceries are expensive. If they say student debt is heavy, that's not crazy either. But again, look at all these things we're talking about. Healthcare, another one. That's a maze. It's become expensive. They don't really understand how to make it work. Remember, the government said they were going to make that easier. And all of this has become harder. If they say corporate America is hypocritical, self-serving, political when it wants to be, silent when it's convenient, and always ready to pass costs down to the consumer, that's not them being crazy either. The question is, what caused that? And what can we actually do to fix it? Because socialism is very good at identifying pain, but it's terrible at curing it. Unless you look at things like MAID. I know I keep coming back to that, but that is how they cure pain. Look at what's happening in Canada. Oh, you're depressed? Let's put a needle in your arm. You won't be depressed anymore. Socialism walks into a room full of angry people and says, you have been robbed. Sometimes that is actually true. Sometimes it's only partially true. And a lot of times it's emotional manipulation either way. But either way, it works because it starts with the wound itself. And if conservatives refuse to acknowledge the wound, we lose the room before the argument even starts. You cannot win a generational argument by pretending grocery receipts, rent checks, car insurance, and student loans are all imaginary. That's not persuasion. That is denial, and I don't just mean the river in Egypt. When we also cannot swing to the other extreme and say, well, if young people are frustrated, then whatever they demand must be justified, we can't do that either. So no, pain does not make bad economics good. Frustration does not make socialism work. Anger does not repeal history. And vibes do not balance a budget. That is the balance we need today, because the pain is real, but socialism is the wrong answer. And I would even dare to say at this point, I think we're asking the wrong question, which is leading to the wrong answer. And if we're going to beat that answer, we have to offer more than mockery. I know, it's fun. It's kitschy. It's entertaining to point and laugh while you're watching Hakeem Jeffries basically crying on his couch. Because here's what too many young voters hear from the right. They hear, stop your bitching. Why aren't you working harder? My generation had it tough too. Have you read Hayek? How about Venezuela? How did that Venezuelan socialism work out for you? Now, some of those points may actually be fair in pieces. But if that is the whole message, we're not reaching anybody outside the choir. A broke 26-year-old who cannot see a path to ownership is not going to be won over by a lecture that sounds like it was written on a country club napkin, or being shouted at them while they accidentally stepped on your lawn while you were sitting on your porch. We need to say something better. We need to say, you're right, the system has been rigged in too many places, but you're not paying attention to who actually rigged it. You're right, the corporate power and government power have gotten too cozy, especially now that there are private-public partnerships. Those are bad. You're right that housing is too expensive, but again, what's causing it to be too expensive? We don't talk about that. You're right that college has become a debt machine. You're right that healthcare is insane, but remember, they told us they were going to fix that with the ACA. So while you're leaning more towards socialism, you're not realizing that socialism is a lot of what's broken. What you're looking at is the problem right now. You want better wages, which only serves the corporations, because the mom and pop shops can't survive if we suddenly jump everybody's wage rate. I mean, look at what happened the last time it went up. It went from what, 550 to 575 to 750, I think, the last time it went up. And granted, that was a long time ago. But look at what happened. Overnight, mom and pop shops folded. Within a couple of years of that happening, the business that I built was gone because people that I was paying were making well above minimum wage. And then when that got basically sliced in half, I went back to the people that I had contracts with and said, hey, now that minimum wage has gone up, we need to renegotiate. And they're like, nah, we'll just go with a bigger company who can spread out the cost. So again, I watched it happen in real time. Minimum wage goes up, smaller companies can't survive, bigger companies can spread the cost out more so you don't feel it as badly, and they win. So again, everything that they're saying they're going to use to fix this is in reality only going to make it worse. Let's look at college. Ever since student loans became a thing, the price of college has gotten insane. because the colleges realized, well, if the government's picking up the tab, then we could basically treat this instead of like higher education, we can make it grades 13, 14, 15, and 16 and treat it as a continuation of high school. And then start pushing people not only to get 4-year degrees, but 6-year degrees and any other degrees that we want. And again, housing is too expensive. But housing is too expensive because supply has been outpaced by demand. Why was supply so strongly outpaced by demand, you might ask? What happens when we have even the agreed upon number of 11 million extra people here that aren't supposed to be here? What do you think happens to the price of housing? Now, let's assume, just for the sake of argument and for safe math, that number was actually closer to probably 22 million, because that's probably closer to what it actually was. What do you think happens to the price of housing when there's 22 million extra people here? So again, all of this is correct. The economy's not been in good shape. We're moving in a better direction now, but it's not been in good shape. But it's not been in good shape because we keep voting for things that they, after we send them to DC, keep voting for things that they tell us are going to make our lives better, and then eventually they make them worse. If you don't believe me, just look at what came of the ACA. Anybody remember what the first A stands for in the ACA? It's supposed to be affordable. The Affordable Care Act that became dubbed Obamacare. I think we did everybody a disservice, even though that was a very catchy name to call it, because they tried to make it an albatross around his neck, and it almost worked. But they stopped talking about the fact that this was supposed to make healthcare more affordable, and it instead made it worse. Now, the left's argument is it only became worse when the right came back in and gutted the ability to enforce people to have mandatory health insurance. But again, in a free society, why the hell is anything mandatory? Once you are above the age of majority, they should not really, in my opinion, be able to mandate anything upon you. And I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but that's how freedom actually works. So again, while all of this may be correct on the surface, the young folks are wrong because they seem to think handing more power to the same kind of institutions that helped create the mess in the first place is actually going to save them. That's the problem, because it's not. So this is the bridge between reality and actual, intellectual argument. This is where we have to go, because a lot of young Americans are not reacting to capitalism as conservatives understand it. They're reacting to crony capitalism. They're reacting to bailouts. They're reacting to government-managed scarcity. They're reacting to government-subsidized demand. They're reacting to government-protected insiders. They're reacting to a system where the big guys get meetings, waivers, subsidies, exemptions, lobbyists, and rescue packages, while everybody else gets told to pull up on those bootstraps just a little bit harder. That is, in fact, not free enterprise, ladies and gentlemen. That is a rigged system that jacked capitalism's name, name tag. And when that is the version of capitalism young people experience, it should not shock us that they suddenly become open to alternatives, even if in reality it's not even that suddenly. Again, that does not make socialism correct or even the right answer. It means the pitch has a customer base. And the customer base is actually growing, not shrinking. So no, I'm not laughing at New York today. I'm not laughing at the DSA sweep. I'm not laughing at the, hey, you're next, bitch. No, not happening. I'm not laughing at the Democratic establishment getting eaten by its own. Although it's been a little entertaining to watch as the activist class turned cannibal. I may enjoy the irony. I may appreciate the political consequences. I may even allow myself a small grin at the fact that the people who spent years calling everyone else extremists are now looking around wondering how the extremists got the keys to the party van. But I'm not laughing at the underlying trend, because if socialism is attractive to young voters and capitalism sounds like a rigged system to them, then we have a persuasion problem. And persuasion problems do not get solved by memes. And trust me, we're really, really good at memes. They get solved by telling the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, that the pain they feel is actually real, but their entitlement is also real. The government distortion is real. The socialist cure is actually poison. And the free market answer has to be more than defending whatever corporate America happens to be doing this week. And that's the next piece. But because me talking, take two. Because before we talk about what government broke, we have to talk about something else. Somewhere along the way, a lot of young Americans were taught to hate the starter life, and that matters. Let me say something that may irritate everybody just a little bit, and that's good, because that's usually where the truth lives. Young people are dealing with real economic pressure. That is true. But some younger people also have a warped idea of what starting out is supposed to look like in life. That, unfortunately, is also true. Both things can, in fact, be true at the same time in this case. Rent is high. Groceries are high. Insurance is ridiculous. Cars are expensive. Starter homes are harder to reach. Interest rates hurt. Student debt matters, especially because they've been sold this idea that a degree was going to lead them to the middle class, and now there's so many people with degrees that the entire system is glutted and nobody really knows what to do. And inflation has eaten the paycheck. All of that is true. But it is also true that the starter life was never supposed to look like established adulthood. A lot of us did not start out living alone in a nice apartment with granite countertops, a perfect kitchen, a golden retriever, a vacation budget, DoorDash 4 nights a week, and a furniture set that matched. That has not ever been, nor was it ever, the baseline. The starter life was roommates, hand-me-down furniture, a couch from somebody's aunt, bad carpet, a coffee table that may or may not have been stolen from a college common area. I think the statute of limitations might be up on that. I hope. A car with one working speaker, a car that made noises you prayed about. A grocery budget held together by peanut butter, ramen, ground beef, and the cheapest store brand cereal that did not taste like the box. That was normal. That wasn't oppression. That was the beginning. And this is where culture matters. Somewhere along the way, a lot of young Americans were taught that the starter life was beneath them. Roommates became failure. Used furniture caused trauma. Driving an old car, well, that was just oppressive. And I have to admit, even I had a moment like that one time. I was down on my luck a little bit, and you guys know some of the story. My dad bought me a new car. Well, my dad bought a new to me car, and he showed it to me, and I was less than grateful. And I have apologized to him for that multiple times. But yeah, it even creeps its head in sometimes for us. Cooking at home becomes deprivation because we all want McDonald's. Working your way up became exploitation because starter jobs aren't real. Waiting, having to wait for things became its own form of injustice. And I'm not saying that to bash an entire generation, at least not completely. I'm saying it because this part of the socialist, because it is part of the socialist sales pitch. Socialism gets powerful when economic frustration meets cultural entitlement. If you take a generation with real bills and then teach them that every delay is an injustice, every limitation is some form of exploitation, every budget constraint is violence, and every rich person's existence is theft, you have created the perfect voter for a redistribution movement. Because now the issue is not just how do I build a life? The issue becomes who is it that owes me the life I want and where can I find them? And that is a very different question. And there's a whole ecosystem that has been designed to feed that expectation. Social media shows the highest reel and hides the payment plan. Influencers sell lifestyle without showing the debt. Here's the thing, folks, and this is something that I have learned the hard way after going out on my own, stepping out on faith and doing this full time. A lot of those folks that are showing you the lavish lifestyle that they have earned through social media promotion, etc., guess what? They're lying to you. They do an Airbnb and rent the house for a day or so for a couple $100, take all the pictures that they can while they're in it. And then maybe they have a friend with a really nice car, or maybe they can talk, maybe they talk it up from a dealership to let them go on a test drive. And then they wait until whoever owns the car isn't anywhere near it, and they start snapping pictures like they own it while they're sitting on it until the owner of the car comes out and says, "What the hell are you doing sitting on my car?" And believe it or not, I've seen outtakes of things like that have actually been made public that are real. So the problem that we have is we have this entire group of people that are now inflating their lifestyle for clicks, hoping that eventually they're going to get paid because they can show you how they got here. And all these folks that are sitting around with, taking all these pictures, laying on piles of cash, guess what? You can get stacks of cash on Amazon that look real on pictures for like $10 a pop for like $50,000 worth. So they're selling you an illusion, but they're selling you an illusion because they're hoping that you're going to pay attention. The problem is the socialist crowd is also selling an illusion. Give us power. We're going to make the government fix what the government broke. The problem is every time you give the government more power, they simply find ways to break more things. I'm going to say this again. If the government actually fixed the things that it broke, eventually we wouldn't need the government anymore. That is why by design, they never really fix anything. So again, as we get back to this, colleges teach a lot of theory, but they don't teach any trade-offs. Politicians promise benefits without explaining that sometimes it's going to require that you tighten your belt a little bit. Corporations sell identity as a subscription model. Credit culture says you don't have to wait. You can have that now. Hell, you can finance your pizza. I never thought I would live in a country where you could finance pizza. I never thought I would live in a country where you had to finance pizza. What the hell? Buy now, pay later says you can feel rich until Tuesday. And then Tuesday comes. And when Tuesday comes, the socialist says you were robbed. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you were robbed by inflation. Maybe you were robbed by a college system that told teenagers to sign six-figure loan documents for degrees with weak earning power. Maybe you were robbed by zoning laws that made it impossible to build enough houses. Maybe you were robbed by politicians who spent money they did not have and then acted shocked when prices rose. Maybe you were robbed by corporate consolidation protected by regulators and lobbyists. Maybe you were also sold a fantasy of adulthood with no apprenticeships. That is the price we cannot ignore, because the right will lose this argument if we only talk about personal responsibility. But the right will also lose this argument if we abandon personal responsibility. The answer is not to say everything is always your fault and everything is awful. It's the opposite of the Lego song. Remember, everything is awesome. Lately, I feel like we've all been screaming, everything is awful. Yeah, anyway, and that's wrong too. The answer is not to say nothing is your fault, because that's also wrong. The answer is to tell the truth. The ladder has gotten harder to climb in some ways, but some people are also mad because nobody told them ladders actually have rungs. This isn't an elevator. You can't just climb in it and wait to get to the top. You have to climb the thing. You have to put in the work. You don't get to start at the roof either. You don't get to start at the top. You start at the bottom. And it's not an automatic process. You don't just get to step in, push a button that says penthouse, and eventually you get there. And the whole time you're in the elevator, all you hear is moving on up. Yeah, no, that's not how any of this works. It's a ladder. You got to climb it. You got to put in the work. But we're not being told that. We're not being taught that. We're not being shown that. And we're instead being shown the people who have put in the work, who have climbed the ladder. And trust me, as we're now finding out, some of these people have done some shady things to get where they are. Look at all the fraud we're uncovering. But if you think it's bad now, when we have this blend of private insurance, government involvement, healthcare insurance mess nightmare, imagine how much easier it will be to steal from you and rob you blind when we have single payer. So this is why the American dream matters, but it still has to be told in the right way. You do not get to start at the top. Now, how we should be talking to these kids and these younger folks is telling them, you may not be the top of the heap here, but you're already among the top 1% of the entire world just because of where you lay your head every night. And that should matter. So the American dream was never a promise that everybody starts at the finish line. That is how the left has been pushing it. That's why they've started pushing for equity, not equality. It was the promise that if you worked, saved, built, sacrificed when you had to, learned, failed at times, recovered from those failures, built yourself a nice family, choose wisely, and then invest wisely and kept going, you could move, you could climb, you could own, you could build something that was yours. That is the part that socialism quietly replaces. Socialism does not teach patience. It teaches grievance. It doesn't teach building. It teaches claiming. It does not teach ownership. It teaches resentment towards those who have ownership. It does not ask, how do we create more opportunity? It asks who already has something we can take from them. And if you teach enough people that the start of life is humiliation, then the person promising to skip their start of life starts looking like a savior. And that is dangerous. And let me tell you something else that the socialism movement has used to our detriment. And it sadly started with our founding fathers. The document was originally supposed to read life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. But they felt like that wouldn't land quite right, so they changed it to the pursuit of happiness. If happiness is your goal and you're unhappy with where you're at, and somebody comes along with this panacea that says, give us control of everything and we'll make your life better, they are in fact pursuing their own version of happiness. This becomes the problem. Because by not teaching people how much having ownership and being able to take stock in your own life and your own accomplishments matters, and all we've done is teach them, hey, this country's all about life, which, hey, you're breathing, you got that part down. Liberty, which is a concept almost nobody understands. And then happiness, which is all everybody's ever chasing, and it's a very fleeting thing, might I add. They've taken everything concrete away. Other than, hey, you're breathing. Guess what? You got the first one of the three. When it was what it should have been, life, liberty, and the pursuit of property, that put a tangible outcome here. The founding fathers wanted people to understand that in this country, you were free to own things. Everybody forgets where they came from. There was no ownership when they left Britain. The kings, the dukes, the earls, the duchesses, all those folks, they owned everything. And you were deigned to allow to live on their lands. There was no ownership. That's why the pursuit of property mattered so much to our founding fathers. That was the stepping stone to freedom. We have taken that, and I understand why they did what they did. Just like I've tried to explain all week. I understand why Trump did what he did. I do. I understand why he had to cut a deal. You're not sure what I'm talking about? There's an entire article that I've put out over on X that explains it. I've done an entire show about it, so I'm not going to go over all that again. But I'm going to say this. They have taken almost the one thing that was guaranteed and tangible that we could have kept putting in front of everyone, and they removed it and made it this fleeting thing that is all about perception. Happiness is perception. If happiness is your goal, you're never going to be happy, because there's going to be days that you're going to wake up and your life is going to suck. Hi, how you doing? We've talked. You know, you guys, a lot of you know my story. You know how hard my life has been. For most all of it, and especially for the last 6 years. But I still get up every day. I still put one foot in front of the other, because I understand that happiness, while relative, is also something that is attainable if you allow yourself to temper it enough to go, no, I may not be happy today, but I can keep pushing until I get to a point where I'm happy. But that's also because I'm able to put tangible goals in front of myself. Because your goals have to be tied to something tangible. And again, the problem that we have with the 18 to 34 crowd is they want everything now all at once, all at the same time, and they don't think they have to wait for it. So they aren't able to set goals for themselves. They aren't able to say, well, I'll move out of mom's basement, find a couple of roommates, hit the Goodwill for some furniture, and then do that for a couple of years while I sock back as much money as I can, since I'm going to be splitting expenses. And hey, guess what? If you can't split expenses quite far enough, that's when you either see if you have the option to take on a new roommate, or maybe to move to somewhere else where the place is a little bigger and maybe the split's a little better. And then you just do whatever you got to do. But again, we don't even want that starter life anymore. Everybody wants to, at this point, everybody basically wants to come out of the womb fully formed with a 7-figure job and, everything they ever want. And that's bad. The problem with everything being that way, with the starter life being, oppressive, is No society can survive if too many people believe they are entitled to the fruits of adulthood without the disciplines of adulthood. But no society can survive if the starter path genuinely disappears either. That's the balance, and it is a delicate one. And conservatives have to be able to say both. We have to be able to say, yes, some young people actually do need to grow up a bit. And yes, some systems do, in fact, need to be broken up or changed. Yes, some expectations are ridiculous. And yes, some prices are absurd because government has made them absurd. Some young voters feel entitled, and yes, some older leaders sold them a broken ladder and then called them lazy for noticing the missing rungs. That's the honest argument, and the honest argument is stronger than the easy argument. The easy argument is they're all communists. No, I mean, some are. Some are, in fact, radical ideologues. Some are professional activists. Some really do want to abolish the systems that make freedom possible in this country. Which is funny when you think about it, because we've had all these people coming over from all over the world and seeing America firsthand, and they're all falling in love with it, while half of us want to destroy everything that made them fall in love with it. Kind of a weird dichotomy when you think about it. A lot of them are just angry. They're broke. They're confused. They've had things they feel like they have been overpromised, underprepared, and being recruited by people who know exactly how to turn frustration into power. That is what the DSA understands. That is what Mamdani understands. That is what the socialist wing has come to understand. They understand that if you can tell people your life is hard because someone else stole your future, you can build a movement. The question is whether conservatives can tell people something truer. Your life is hard for several reasons. Some are personal, some are cultural. Some are, in fact, economic. Some are even political because you keep voting for the same stupid people. Some are spiritual. Some are the result of bad decisions. Some are the result of bad policy. Some are the result of institutions that protected insiders and punished builders. But the answer is not to make government more powerful. As a matter of fact, that is never the answer. The answer is to restore the conditions that let ordinary people build again. That means energy abundance. That means sound money. That means fewer barriers to small business. That means honest education that actually teaches people things that they need to know to be able to succeed. That means making people understand that family is important. That also means a lot more local control instead of centralizing everything. That means stopping the bailouts and the carve-outs and the corporate socialism for people who already have lawyers. And it means telling young people the truth. You're not entitled to skip the struggle, but you are entitled to a country where struggle can still lead somewhere. That's the distinction. If we can make that distinction clearly, we have a chance. If we cannot, the socialists will walk into the confusion and say, let me simplify this for you. They stole it. Vote for me, and I'm going to take it back. And that's how the pitch works. And that brings us to the next piece, because in a lot of the areas, young people are angry about government because it did not just fail to fix the problem. Government actually, in a lot of cases, helped create the problems. This is the argument. This is the part of the argument that has been said plainly. A lot of young Americans are mad at capitalism for problems caused or worsened by government intervention. Not all problems. I'm not going to overstate that. Markets are not perfect. Businesses can, in fact, be greedy. Corporations can get lazy, political, monopolistic, cowardly, and also corrupt. Private actors can, in fact, and do oftentimes make bad decisions. Global supply shocks are real. So are labor costs, though. So are material costs. Demand is real. Interest rates are real. So no, not every price increase is because of government. But in the biggest pain points young voters complain about, housing, college, healthcare, energy, inflation, government is also not an innocent bystander. In many cases, government restricts supply, subsidizes demand, distorts prices, protects insiders, then blames capitalism when people start to notice. That's the pattern. Start with housing. Young voters are angry because rent is high and starter homes feel out of reach. Fair, but why is housing so expensive in so many places? Part of the answer is the government made it hard to build. There are now things like zoning restrictions, minimum lot sizes, parking requirements, density limits, permitting delays, environmental reviews, neighborhood veto power. Local rules that protect people who already own property by making it harder to build housing for people who do not. Then young renters look around and say, capitalism has failed me. No, in many cases, government restricted supply and then blame the market for scarcity. That's not the free market. That is government-mandated scarcity. Now, let's take that a step further. With that government-mandated scarcity, now we have what? Again, using the safe number before we started mass deportations. 22 million extra people in this country, along with government-mandated scarcity. You didn't think that was going to be a problem. Now let's look at college. Young people were told for decades, go to college, do whatever it takes, borrow money, sign here. Don't worry about the price. We can worry about that later. The degree will actually pay for itself. That was one of the biggest selling points when I went to college years ago. I'm old. First round of college was in 1992. And once the government-backed loan machine made huge amounts of borrowed money available to teenagers, colleges had less pressure to control costs. They built out their administrations. They expanded their amenities. They added programs. They raised tuitions. And when the bill came due, young people were told capitalism did this. No, a lot of this was government-subsidized demand. Government told teenagers, don't worry about this price. Just sign here. Then colleges raised the price, built empires, and left the teenagers with the bill. Now, let's take an honest look at healthcare. If you want to show a young voter the free market, don't point to American healthcare. American healthcare is one of the least free market major sectors in American life. It is a maze of federal programs, state rules, insurance mandates, licensing restrictions, certificate of need laws, hospital consolidation, opaque pricing, employer-based insurance distortions, and reimbursement systems nobody can explain without a whiteboard and usually a sedative or two. Then the bill comes. Nobody knows what anything costs. Nobody knows why it costs what it costs. Nobody knows who negotiated what, and somehow this gets sold as capitalism. No, that is not the free market. That is a government-regulated labyrinth where the patient finds out the price after the bill punches him in the nads. Note said face. I changed it. Then energy. Energy is life. Energy is food. Energy is transportation. Energy is manufacturing. Energy is heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. And ask our European friends how much they like American air conditioning compared to what they have at home. Energy is whether grandma can afford her utility bill and whether the grocery store can keep prices down. And yet for years, politicians treated energy like a moral theater project. Restrict production, delay permits, mandate favorite types of energy, subsidize politically preferred technologies, punish reliable energy, complicate and sometimes even destroy or remove pipelines, make the grid fragile. Then when prices rise, that's all capitalism's fault. Nope. It's not how any of this works. You cannot regulate energy like a political science project and then act shocked when the electric bill shows up with a political science degree. Don't even get me started on this next point, but we're going to talk about it anyway, because next we have inflation. This one is simple. Inflation is not just greedy companies. Inflation is what happens when government spends, borrows, prints, subsidizes, demands, restricts supply, and then acts surprised that suddenly your dollars are able to buy less. Yes, companies can and do exploit conditions. Yes, some corporations will raise prices as far as they can, but they did not create the monetary environment by themselves. Politicians spent money we didn't have. Central banks accommodated too much. Government pumped demand. Supply chains were constrained. Regulations slowed response. And then regular people paid more for groceries, gas, rent, insurance, cars, and everything else. Inflation is the bill for promises politicians made with money they didn't have because they have machines that can print it. I'm going to say this again. If politicians have access to money, to magic money machines that can print money whenever the bill is due, we should have the same. I would love to be able to look at, lovely wife and say, hey, the electric bill's due. I'm going to go fire up the laser jet so we can pay the electric bill. If the guy, remember, they're supposed to work for us. So if they can do that, why can't we? Yes, I'm being absurd right now, but it's still kind of the point. So all of that we just talked about, young people felt all of that, especially those that have just now started to try to go out on their own. They felt they probably had a stroke in the grocery aisle. They felt it at the gas pump. They felt it when their lease was renewed and their rent went up. They felt it when their car insurance jumped. They felt it when eating out became a budget decision. I'm going to be honest, though. Eating out was always supposed to be a budget decision. You know, I saw somebody post about this the other day. I was like, I don't understand why hamburgers are $10 now. Well, there's no such thing as an entry-level job anymore, and eating out's no longer a luxury. Almost everybody tries to do it every single night. They felt it when all of this became reality, and then the socialists came along and said, see, capitalism sucks and it failed you. No. Government and cronyism helped break the price system. Then socialism showed up with a bigger hammer and said, let me fix it. You can't fix what's already broken with a hammer, folks. And that's the trap. The same voters angry about government distorted prices are being told the solution is more government control over those very same prices, along with wages, housing, energy, healthcare, and business. That's how the argument turns. Government breaks the market looks broken. Socialists point to the broken market and say markets don't work. Then they ask for more power so they can fix what doesn't work. And when more power creates more failure, they blame enemies, greedy landlords, greedy grocers, greedy doctors, greedy energy companies, greedy employers, greedy farmers, greedy truckers, greedy whatever they can point at the time. There's always an enemy worth exploiting. That is why the history lessons matter. Because once government claims the power to control the economy in the name of fairness, it also needs the power to punish whoever gets blamed when fairness doesn't show up. That's where this goes. It doesn't start with gulags. It starts with price controls. It starts with emergency powers. It starts with nationalization. It starts with temporary interventions. It starts with just make them pay. It starts with, well, let's just cap the rent. Let's just cancel that student debt. Why can't we seize those profits again? Why aren't we punishing the hoarders? Misinformation is bad. We should silence that. And then one day the government has built a machine powerful enough to deliver paradise and powerful enough to punish anyone who notices paradise never actually got here. That's why this matters. New York is not just a local election story. It is the latest warning that a generation is being sold a dangerous cure for real problems. And the right has to respond with something way better than mockery. Because again, it's easy. It's fun to mock. It can be. I do it all the time. But we also have to say, yes, the cost of living is in fact too high. But this is what we're trying to do to fix it. Yes, the ladder is harder to climb. But we've also been trying to help with that too. Yes, the insiders have rigged too many games. That's part of why we're starting to show people all the fraud. That's the thing. You want to talk about rigged games? Look at all the places they're finding that people have stolen from us. How much of our national debt probably wouldn't even exist right now if so many hundreds of thousands of people hadn't figured out how to steal from the government dole? You want to talk about government spending money it doesn't have? It's having to do that because everything it tries to spend is being stolen. So the answer is to give them more power? I don't think so. So the government has protected too many powerful people, and they have. Yes, crony capitalism is real, but the cure is not and can never be socialism. The cure is not more power to the people who broke the system in the first place. The cure is to start pointing out the rigged games so we can start fixing them. Start the process to restore real competition. Build more houses. Produce abundant energy. Stop subsidizing bad decisions. Stop protecting incumbents. I guess New York got that message. Stop punishing small builders. Stop pretending every problem is solved by giving Washington, Albany, Sacramento, or your local city hall more power. Because a lot of young Americans are not reacting to capitalism. They're reacting to government-managed scarcity, government-subsidized demand, and government-protected insiders. And then they're being told the answer is to give those same institutions more power. That is insane. That is dangerous, and that is the fight that we are facing. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was only supposed to be hour one. That's how many notes I have today. So, I think because my voice is fading and I do still have several hours of work that I have to get through tonight, I think we're going to go ahead and cut it just a few minutes short. and I'm going to save this part as the opening for Friday's show, since I still have at least another hour of material. So I promised you guys, if my voice started cutting out, that we would finish the show. So that will happen on Friday. We will finish this and then move into any news of the day that is also relevant. But we're going to get out of here because I do have to rest my pipes a little bit because I've got a lot of talking to do later tonight as well. And I can hear my voice fading as we go, which is why I skipped one of the final breaks. So my name is Rick Robinson, bronchitis and all, doing this thing. We'll be back. I'll be back tonight. First pushing buttons for inquiry. That is at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then I believe Behind Enemy Lines is back. If my voice is shaping up better by then, I may join them for whatever their topic is. If not, I may just save it for Rick and Orty. And as far as I know, Rick and Orty will be our closing act for the night. Again, I don't think Sean comes back until beginning in July sometime. My name is Rick Robinson, the voiceless one. Some of you are cheering that fact, and I don't like you, but it's okay. And I'll be back later tonight. I want to thank everybody who took the time to stop in today. I know things with XChat have been confusing, and there was the copyright strike on the YouTube channel that we finally got resolved. So we're starting to pop up in all the right places again. So if you like what we do here, make sure you are liking, following, sharing. If you don't like what we do here, share us and point and laugh. I'm okay with that too. But yeah, we're going to jump because I can feel my voice going away. Yay. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Say goodnight, Gracie.